continuing the same course for another 3, 4, 5 years and beyond. It's time to end this war. It's time to focus on the true enemy here, al-Qaeda. I yield back my time.
The gentlewoman has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back. Who seeks recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The Chair will advise at this time we're not to that point in the reading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have an amendment at the desk.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Boswell of Iowa. Page 122, line 10, strike not and insert a not. Page 124, after line 7, insert the following, B. It is the sense of Congress that suicide prevention programs should be a priority of the military departments with respect to reinvesting the efficiency savings described in subsection A.
Mr. Chairman,
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
A point of order is reserved. The gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple amendment. It clarifies that the defense suicide prevention programs are a priority and should always remain a priority. I'm not alone in my concern for the rate of suicide among our service members and the active duty, the Guard, Reserve components. I, like some of the rest of you, have had that experience in my own constituency back in the Iowa Reserve. The Department of Defense has identified large potential savings from improved efficiencies, totaling as much as $100 billion over the next 5 years. Section 8128 directs the Secretary to report to Congress on how it will redirect those savings into priorities of the military departments. However, there is no direction that ensures that the Secretary include existing suicide programs as priorities for reinvestment from these savings. This amendment simply clarifies that suicide prevention programs, which already exist, have already been authorized, are a priority and will remain a priority. We must do everything in our power to reduce the suicide rates of our men and women in uniform, and this amendment fulfills that obligation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve the balance of his time.
I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I make a point of order against the amendment because it proposes to change existing law and constitutes legislation on an appropriations bill, therefore violates Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule states in pertinent part, an amendment to a general appropriation bill should not be in order if changing existing law. This amendment proposes to state a legislative position, and I ask for a ruling from the Chair.
Chairman.
Does any other member wish to be heard?
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Iowa.
Well, as you might expect, respectfully, I rise in opposition to the point of order. In accordance with Clause 2 of Rule 21, this amendment does not make a new appropriation. It does not reappropriate unused funds. It does not restrict the availability of funds, and it does not change existing law. In fact, defense suicide prevention programs have already been authorized by law. For example, the Yellow Ribbon Program. which helps support National Guard and Reserve service members and families. This amendment simply clarifies the suicide prevention programs which already exist and have already been authorized are a priority and will always remain a priority. So I humbly suggest that no one in good conscience could suggest otherwise. And I thank you, and I yield back.
Any other member wish to be heard? If not, the chair will rule. The chair finds that this amendment includes language expressing the sense of Congress. Therefore, the amendment constitutes legislation in violation of Clause 2 of Rule 21. The point of order is sustained, and the amendment is not in order. The clerk will read the amendment. The clerk will read the bill.
Page 124, line 8, Section 8129, none of the funds may be used to enter into a contract, memorandum of understanding, or cooperative agreement with any corporation that any unpaid federal tax liability that has been assessed and that is not being paid in a timely manner pursuant to an agreement. Section 8130, none of the funds may be used to enter into a contract, memorandum of understanding, or cooperative agreement with any corporation that was convicted of a felony criminal violation within the preceding 24 months. Title IX, Overseas Contingency Operations, Military Personnel, Army, $6,822,635,000.
Mr. Chairman,
For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Lee of California, page 125, line 6. Insert after the dollar amount the following: reduced by $3,438,789,000. Page 125, line 12. Insert after the dollar amount the following: reduced by $445,117,000.
I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be considered as read.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there objection?
I reserve a point of order on the gentlewoman's amendment.
Without objection, the reading will be dispensed with, and a point of order is reserved. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just first thank Chairman Rogers, our ranking member, Mr. Dix, and my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee for their hard work in putting together this bill. I rise today to offer the Lee-Jones Amendment, joined by Representative Nadler, Woolsey, Ulver, Stark, Jesse Jackson, Jr., Honda, Conyers, Grijalva, Paul, and Amash. And I want to thank each of my colleagues for joining Representative Jones and me on this important amendment. This amendment would end the war in Afghanistan by ending the funding for combat operation, but would provide funds to bring our troops home in a safe and orderly manner. And while I would have preferred to offer the Lee Amendment, which I have offered in the past, to fence off and to limit funding to the safe, orderly withdrawal of all U.S. armed forces in Afghanistan, I was unable to do so today, given that we are debating on an appropriations bill. So I want to emphasize again this important point, that while this amendment cuts war funding, it cuts combat operation funding, but it does leave enough funding to provide for the safe and orderly return of all U.S. forces from Afghanistan. I speak today as the daughter of a lieutenant colonel who fought in several wars, one who knows the trauma and devastation of wars on families. I want to be clear that our servicemen and women have performed with incredible courage and commitment in Afghanistan. They're doing everything we ask them to do, but the truth is they have been put in an impossible position. They are fighting in a way with no military solution and no end in sight. Only a political and diplomatic solution and a regional stabilization strategy will end this war. In fact, this concern of war without end is why I opposed the resolution authorizing military force on September 14, 2001. It began a series of blank checks that we have been writing for nearly a decade now. There are few things that we know with certainty regarding the situation in Afghanistan. We know that corruption persists unabated and in many cases has been fueled by the U.S. occupation and influx of foreign cash. President Karzai has proven himself time and time again unwilling or at least unable to meaningfully root out corruption within his own administration. We know that the United States troop presence has increased from 4,000 troops in 2002 to almost 100,000 in 2011. At the same time, military and civilian casualties have increased at record rates and violence is on the rise. We also know that al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan has been all but eliminated and Osama bin Laden is dead. It's not feasible or in our national security interest to address this threat through a military-first, boots-on-the-ground strategy in Afghanistan. And we know, as military and foreign policy experts from across the political spectrum have told us repeatedly, that the situation in Afghanistan will not be resolved by a military solution. We need to bring our troops home safely and swiftly, and that's why I'm offering this amendment. This war is costing us too much. With over 1,600 troops killed and tens of thousands more seriously wounded in Afghanistan, the human toll continues to mount every day. And we've already spent over $400 billion fighting in Afghanistan. It's past time to admit that we can no longer afford to send more blank checks for a war without end. The United States has squandered more than $1.1 trillion on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Economists estimate that the total direct and indirect costs of these two wars by their end may total as much as $6 trillion. With no military solution, we need to redirect these funds to job creation and supporting those efforts for the most vulnerable, including those who have been unemployed for over 2 years and have no more unemployment benefits. While we spend $2 billion a week, mind you, $2 billion a week on this decade-long war, critical programs like Medicare are on the chopping block as we seek to get our nation's finances in order. The American people are sick and tired of this war and the massive unending spending that it requires. Just last month, the United States Conference of Mayors passed a resolution to end the wars and to use the savings to build bridges and schools and infrastructure here at home where it is needed. The resolution specifically calls on the President and the United States Congress to end the wars as soon as strategically possible and bring these war dollars home to meet vital human needs, promote job creation, rebuild our infrastructure, aid municipal and state governments, and develop a new economy based on renewable, sustainable energy and reduce the federal debt. We need to bring our troops back and use the savings to address our nation's fiscal challenges. The American people recognize this. It's time to say that enough is enough. It's time to begin the safe and orderly withdrawal of United States troops from Afghanistan. This amendment does just that by ending the funding of combat operations in Afghanistan while maintaining funds for a safe and orderly withdrawal. This is not a cut-and-run amendment. This is a responsible amendment to bring our troops home now. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this amendment, helping bring our servicemen and women home safely and ending the war in Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady may not reserve the balance of her time. Gentlewoman yields back.
I yield the balance of my time. Excuse me.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I remove my reservation. I move to strike the last word and to speak in opposition to the amendment.
Please withdrawn. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the gentlewoman has an amendment to reduce the overseas contingency operation, a.k.a. the War on Terror, by $33 billion. She intends for this amendment to support, as she says, an orderly withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. However, such a reduction would in fact severely disrupt and suspend a redeployment from Afghanistan. The magnitude of her funding reduction would also threaten the ability to support troop pay and safety. The committee has provided funds to begin the redeployment of troops from Afghanistan. If the redeployment from Afghanistan were to be accelerated, there would be significant increases in personnel, equipment, and transportation costs in fiscal year 2012. Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment and urge others to do likewise. And I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California rise?
I move to strike the last word.
The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of the amendment offered by my dear friend Congresswoman Lee and the rest of the authors. Congresswoman Lee is a courageous voice for peace in Afghanistan and around the world. And what she says is that the bottom line of this amendment is clear. We should not spend one more dime waging war in Afghanistan. The only money we appropriate must be used to wind down the war with a safe, orderly, complete, and long overdue military redeployment out of Afghanistan. The White House announced about 2 weeks ago that we would have a troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Well, I believe that information, that announcement, was tragically inadequate. Actually, I was hoping to hear that at least 50,000 troops would be coming home by the end of 2011. Instead, the President announced his intention to wait another year to the summer of 2012 before removing the 33,000 troops that were added with the surge. Too slow, too cautious, too modest. I don't know how much clearer the writing on the wall has to be, Mr. Chairman. Afghanistan remains in terrible disarray with a terribly corrupt central government and a security force actually incapable of enforcing security. Our military footprint isn't doing enough in Afghanistan. It is actually causing more harm than good. Meanwhile, the human cost here at home is nothing short of devastating. Casualties have spiked. Americans are dying in Afghanistan at an unacceptable rate. More than 200 troops so far this year and over 1,600 troops since the war began nearly a decade ago. And, Mr. Chairman, making it home alive doesn't mean making it home whole. Thousands upon thousands of service members will spend the rest of their lives coping with the wounds and the scars they acquired in this unnecessary war. Many have left limbs behind in Afghanistan. Others will never regain their mental health or their peace of mind, suffering the devastating effects of PTSD. Why would we continue to throw another dollar at a war that has done so much to hurt our people and Afghan civilians and done so little to help Afghanistan in general? This week, as a matter of fact, all of Washington is abuzz about the debt ceiling negotiations. Commentators are asking us, where will we find consensus that preserves the full faith and credit of the United States of America? Well, Mr. Chairman, there is a consensus in the United States, a consensus among the American people, and that is that $10 billion a month that we're spending in Afghanistan is roughly $10 billion too much. But war spending is not on the table in these talks. Instead, Medicare cuts are on the table, while my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are clinging tight to loopholes and subsidies for oil companies, corporate jets, horse racing industries. Their spending priorities are just totally warped. Mr. Chairman, it's time to bring all this in line with the priorities of the American people. It's time to end this war. It's time to stop investing money that we need right here at home, and it is time to invest only in bringing our troops home safely. With that, Mr. Chairman, I strongly urge all of my colleagues to support the Lee amendment. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Last word.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I won't take 5 minutes. But I rise to speak in support of the Lee Amendment, which I have the honor of co-sponsoring. My views on Afghanistan I expressed a little while ago, but I just want to make a couple of comments. The gentleman from California, Mr. Lewis, said we have to be careful, that we have to be wary of a vacuum should we pull out. He analogized it to what happened when the Soviets lost and there was a vacuum because we turned our backs on it. And he was right. We should not have turned our backs on helping with schooling and other things in Afghanistan at that time. But the fact of the matter is, the world's history is full of empires that threw away their substance on silly military adventures. This is a silly military adventure. It's a total waste because it is a classic where we are fighting when we have forgotten why we are fighting. We went into Afghanistan to get rid of the al-Qaeda bases. That took a week. For good measure, we spent another week and got rid of the Taliban government. Now what are we fighting for the last 8 years? To put a government in our image? It's not going to happen. To install and see that there is a government that can rule from Kabul? There hasn't been a government in Kabul who's ran in the entire country since Alexander the Great. That's not going to happen. We can't settle their civil war, which has now gone on for 35 years. Nor will settling their civil war aid our security, which we can't do anyway. And we don't have to. Our security is fighting the terrorists. But the terrorists are all over the place. And maybe we have to, if they develop a base in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, maybe we have to bomb it or send in special forces. Ditto for Somalia or Yemen or God knows where. Every sovereign country, as a condition of its sovereignty, must make sure that its territory is not used to attack someone else. And if territory of some country is being used to attack us or to plot mayhem against us, we have the right and the duty, if necessary, to deal with that. But that's not the question in Afghanistan. The CIA, as I said before, tells us there are fewer than 100 people there. Why do we need 70,000 troops? Those troops could be better occupied back home in the United States, training, helping fight disasters. Our money could be better occupied dealing with our serious fiscal problems, building up our infrastructure, building up our schools, building up our social services, and even building up our military for real threats. There are real threats in the world. Pakistan is dangerous because they have nuclear weapons. We have to pay attention to it. But I fail to see any purpose whatsoever for having tens of thousands of troops, tens of billions of dollars in Afghanistan, where we vanquished the enemy 10 years ago. We ought to declare victory. We should have pulled out, and we should do so right now. And I thank the gentlelady for her amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for the yeas and nays on recorded vote, please.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from California will be postponed. Who seeks recognition?
Who's that?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont rise? For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Garamendi of California, page 125, line 6. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $2,695,031,000. Page 125, line 12. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $348,845,000. Page 125, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $264,718,000. Page 125, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $521,937,000. Page 126, line 5. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $81,201,000. Page 126, line 11. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $16,362,000. Page 126, line 17. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $9,964,000. Page 126, line 23. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $10,511,000. Page 127, line 5. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $247,421,000. Page 127, line 11. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $3,698,000. Page 127, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $8,662,596,000. Page 127, line 24. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $1,584,616,000. Page 128, line 5. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $909,681,000. Page 128, line 11. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $2,359,569,000.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Unanimous consent to dispense with reading the rest of the amendment.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank my colleagues for bringing that recitation to an end, but I also urge my colleagues to pay careful attention to what we're trying to accomplish here. I'll try to explain it without reading each and every one of those lines. The Afghan study group, Richard Haas and many others who are very familiar with the Afghanistan war and the way in which it is being conducted, have suggested that by the end of 2012, America should have no more than 25,000 troops in Afghanistan, and then further wind down the war in 2013 to 10,000 troops focused on terrorists, focused on al-Qaeda. As I spoke a few moments ago on this issue, this amendment is to accomplish that goal, to wind down the war in a responsible way over the next 18 months, so that at the end of the 18 months, that would be December 31st, 2012, that there be no more than 25,000 troops in Afghanistan. Now, unfortunately, I can't add the rest of it, but I will at least give the reason for this, and that is to pivot on the success of getting bin Laden. We went to Afghanistan to get al-Qaeda. We succeeded. And now we are involved in a civil war, a great civil war, a 5-sided civil war, maybe a 6- or 7-sided civil war. And we are supporting a government in that war that is, at best, corrupt and quite possibly even more inept. So what are we doing there, besides spending $120 billion a year? Well, we are kind of fighting it out. We're losing a lot of Americans, and even more Afghans are dying. We're not going to be able to solve this with troops on the ground. This war needs to be negotiated. We ought to spend as much effort as we are spending on the troops. We should spend that on negotiations. Unfortunately, little or no negotiations are going on that are at least talked about publicly, and I would hope they're going on privately, secretly, but I don't think that to be the case. So we need a negotiated settlement. We need to pivot on the success of bin Laden. We need to focus like a laser on al-Qaeda wherever they happen to be in the world. And we know that they are in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, other places in the world, including the United States. So our focus must be on that, not on this civil war. We cannot solve it with our troops in Afghanistan. This amendment would cause us as members of Congress, to exert the authority given to us by the Constitution. That is the power of the purse. And by denying funding for more than 25,000 troops at the end of 2012, we will accomplish the goal of rapidly, appropriately winding down the war. Not my words, but the words of the Afghan Study Group and Richard Haass, people that know these issues. We must do this for our own good, for the good of this nation. We're sitting here in the midst of a great debate upon a default crisis. Back and forth about how do we deal with the deficit. Well, one way we can deal with the deficit is to end this war. $120 billion a year adds up to $1/3 of $1 trillion in just 3 years. We're not suggesting we can get that. We know we're going to have to maintain some sort of a presence there. But surely we don't need to spend $120 billion in Afghanistan when in our own country we are denying our children an education for lack of money. We are denying our elderly the health care that they need. For example, terminating Medicare for lack of money. We are not feeding our children. 60 Minutes recently did a heart-wrenching story on homeless children living in cars and hotels in America because their parents have lost their jobs. We have an unemployment rate that demands our attention, demands our investment in America, rebuilding America's bridges, roads, rebuilding our manufacturing sector, making it in America once again, rebuilding the real strength of this nation, its economy, and the middle class so that they can have jobs that will allow them to stay in their homes, provide for their children, live the good American life. We must end this war. We must first wind it down. Were this more than an appropriation bill, I would have gone to step 2, which is 10,000 at the end of 2013, with a mission that is the original mission, that is going after the terrorist, not nation building. We must, as the President said, rebuild our nation, and unlike the President, this amendment offers us the opportunity to use our money to rebuild this nation. And by the way, for you deficit hawks, it's all borrowed money. You're borrowing money for Afghanistan or you're borrowing money to rebuild this nation. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Move to strike the word and rise in opposition to the amendment. We oppose this amendment for the same reason we oppose the gentlewoman amendment from California on the last vote. It would be highly disruptive to our troops, and I think put them at great risk to their personal safety. So we oppose the amendment.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Ask for the ayes and nays. A recorded vote.
Gentleman has asked for a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. The clerk will read.
Page 125, line 10, military personnel, Navy, $919,034,000. Military personnel, Marine Corps, $675,360,000. Military personnel, Air Force, $1,436,353,000. Reserve personnel, Army, $207,162,000. Reserve personnel, Navy, $44,530,000. Reserve personnel, Marine Corps, $25,421,000. Reserve personnel, Air Force, $26,815,000. National Guard personnel, Army, $646,879,000. National Guard Personnel Air Force, $9,435,000. Operation and Maintenance Army.
For what purpose does the gentleman rise?
$39,175,755,000.
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Welch of Vermont, page 127, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $200 million.
That the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection, so ordered.
I reserve a point of order on the gentleman's amendment.
A point of order is reserved. The gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the central questions that Congress must address is whether to continue the policy of nation building in Afghanistan. As previous speakers have indicated, it's expensive. It's also very questionable as to whether it's anything but a failure. The cornerstone of the nation building program is the Commander's Emergency Response Program. That gives the commanders flexibility at their own discretion to authorize significant infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, the goal being to win hearts and minds of the Afghan citizens. When you lay it out by its intentions, it's a very reasonable tool to provide to our commanders. The problem is the evidence is in, and it has been a failure. The $400 million Commander's Emergency Response Program, CERP, is the central component, a central component of what I believe is a failed nation-building strategy. And the fundamental question here is this: does the Defense Appropriations Bill double down on the nation-building approach which has been drawn into such question? Now, the CERP development dollars, according to the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGIR, about half of the CERP projects reviewed were unsustainable and fell into disrepair immediately following their transfer into Afghan hands. That failure of sustainment is real, and it is not subject to something that we can control here. So the question that we have to ask on behalf of our military strategy is the money being used in a way that's effective? From the perspective of the Afghans, is it being used on projects that are sustainable? And the evidence on the basis of our SIGIR report is the answer is no. And it's not surprising. You know, we've got to get a bit real about this, whatever your position is on Afghanistan. If you have a government that has no infrastructure of civil service, that doesn't even have the capacity to do the sustainment, they don't have a civil service that can go out and maintain and repair the roads and other projects, is it realistic to expect that they will? When you have a government that is corrupt, for whatever reason, but where the money that gets injected by the U.S. taxpayer into these projects with the best of intentions gets siphoned off into paying off people who have positions of authority, is that a wise use of our taxpayer dollar? Is it going to help our military ultimately be successful? So the question that we have a responsibility to answer is whether this tool of nation building makes sense. One of the other questions I think it's fair to ask, many of us have been to Afghanistan, and we've met with some of our USAID people, our State Department people are out there, our military people, of course, trying to implement these projects, Mr. Speaker. The amount of security that is required in order to allow people to do the simplest of projects in the middle of a shooting war is an enormous expense. And the question that comes to mind for me, and I think many Americans, is this: does it make sense to do these infrastructure projects, these hearts and minds projects, in the middle of a shooting war? or are those things that have to be done before or after? That's really the question. So the intention of this program makes sense. The flexibility to our commanders they see as desirable. It is a tool that they can use. But we've had 10 years now of history. We've had a fully blown report by Siger that has said it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So is it time for this Congress to call the question about the wisdom and the efficacy of this nation-building tool, the CERT programs that fall into disrepair immediately upon their completion? Our amendment calls the question, Mr. Speaker, and it would cut in half, which is about the amount that's documented to be wasted, the amount that is spent by U.S. taxpayers on these nation-building activities in Afghanistan. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I make a point of order against the gentleman's amendment. Mr. Chairman, the amendment proposes to amend portions of the bill not yet read. The amendment may not be considered en bloc, Section 3J of House Resolution 5, the 112th Congress, because the amendment does not merely propose to transfer appropriations among objects in the bill, but also proposes language other than the amounts. And I ask for a ruling on the point of order.
Does any other member wish to be heard on this point of order? The chair will rule. To be considered en bloc pursuant to Section 3J1 of House Resolution 5, an amendment must propose only to transfer appropriations from an object or objects in the bill to a spending reduction account. Because the amendment offered by the gentleman from Vermont proposes other changes to the bill, namely changing the level of a limitation, it may not avail itself of Section 3J1 of House Resolution 5 to address the spending reduction account. The amendment is not in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Nadler of New York, page 127, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $15 million, increased by $15 million.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I offer an amendment tonight that will save both blood and an immense amount of money. The amendment I'm introducing, along with Congressman Blumenauer, designates already authorized funds in the amount of $15 million to be used to insulate the shelters at forward operating bases in Afghanistan. Properly insulating military shelters can significantly reduce energy consumption, which in turn can decrease the number of vulnerable fuel convoys needed to support our troops. These fuel convoys cost us dearly. They are absolutely vital supply link to our troops in the field, but they are exposed to constant and devastating attack. Despite the Pentagon spending $24 billion a year to protect fuel convoys in Afghanistan, more than 3,000 troops and civilian contractors have been killed or wounded while riding on convoy. What's more, fully two-thirds of the fuel used in Afghanistan goes to provide electricity for air conditioning and heat at military installations. If we can reduce the energy required to heat and cool shelters in the field, then we can reduce the number of vulnerable fuel trucks needed to support the operations. Simply put, insulating the structures in the field will save lives from people who will not be on convoys to be attacked. It will also save money. Properly insulated shelters use up to 92% less energy for the heating and cooling. With more than 200,000 gallons of diesel fuel used every day to power our forward operating bases in Afghanistan, insulating our field shelters has the potential to significantly reduce fuel consumption. A similar insulation effort in Iraq has led to almost $1 billion a year in savings and has taken more than 11,000 fuel trucks off the road. This in turn has helped to prevent an estimated 458 American casualties in Iraq. A little arithmetic will show you that this $15 million invested in insulating the shelters in the forward bases in Iraq in Afghanistan should save several billion dollars in costs, as well as thousands of lives. I want to thank Congressman Blumenauer, Hinchey, and Welch for their support in this amendment. Together, the amendment provides a common-sense way to reduce fuel consumption across the war zone. This would save about two-thirds of the 200,000 gallons used a day, with the total cost of fuel sometimes exceeding $400 a gallon in Afghanistan, including the transport costs, and thousands of casualties suffered by fuel convoys. A small investment of $15 million in energy-efficient insulation can go a long way in saving thousands of lives and upwards of billions of dollars in resources. I urge passage of this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Purpose is the gentleman from Florida rise.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. This amendment is very, very similar to one that the House rejected earlier today. The project that would be funded by this amendment, by the shifting of this money, is not an authorized program to begin with. But even if it were, the Army's O&M account in the OCO portion of the bill is funded at over $39.1 billion. And should this project remain in the final authorization bill, the Department concurs that if the Department concurs that it is a high enough priority, then there simply are ample funds to cover it with the $39.1 billion. And so I see no reason for this amendment, and I oppose the amendment. And I yield back.
On the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule...
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote on that.
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
Okay.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. Clerk will read.
Page 127, line 22, Operation and Maintenance, Navy, $6,749,489,000. Operation and Maintenance, Marine Corps, $3,571,210,000. Operation and Maintenance, Air Force, $10,739,587,000. Operation and Maintenance, Defense-wide, $9,312,876,000.
Mr. Chairman. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will.
Yes, will the gentleman specify?
Will the gentleman specify the amendment?
It's page 128, line 17.
Both of them start out with 128, line 17. The clerk has two amendments.
The clerk has two amendments with the same page number. Could you provide a little bit more specification on the amendment?
Strikes $1 billion.
The clerk will designate.
Amendment offered by Mr. Poe of Texas, page 128, line 17. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $1 billion. Page 129, line 1. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $1 billion. Page 161, line 12. After the dollar amount, insert increase by $1 billion.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment deals with the money that we give Pakistan. It specifically deals with the reimbursement account that the United States pays for the war on terror to reimburse Pakistan for the spending that they do and the money that they request back from the United States. Specifically takes $1 billion out of the reimbursement account and applies it to the the Spending Reduction Act. Since May the 2nd, when Osama bin Laden was taken out and we learned more about the role that Pakistan is playing, or shall I say not playing, in the war on terror, they have become more and more an unfaithful ally. President Bush said when the war on terror began to countries throughout the world, either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. Pakistan is yet to prove which side they are really on. So much so that when Osama bin Laden was taken out by the American military, we did not trust Pakistan enough to even tell them that we were going to come into their country. Our distrust against that country has been proven over and over again since that date. On May the 16th, the Wall Street Journal reported that over 40% of the money that Pakistan requests for reimbursement for military aid is denied by the federal government because those claims are unfounded by the federal government. In one case last year, the United States paid millions of dollars to refurbish 4 helicopters to help Pakistan's army transport troops into battle against the Taliban. But it turned out that Pakistan diverted three of those aircraft to peacekeeping duties in Sudan, operations which Pakistan receives compensation from the United Nations. Other claims include a $26 million charge for barbed wire and pickets and $70 million for radar maintenance, although there is no enemy air threat related to the war on terror. Then on May the 22nd, 15 to 20 militants stormed 3 hangars at the Naval Aviation Base in Karachi. It took the Pakistan military over 15 hours to end that siege. 2 U.S. P-3Cs were destroyed. The PC-3 or the P-3C is an anti-submarine and marine surveillance aircraft. Some reports now indicate it was an inside job, as the terrorists had military uniforms and knew exactly where the planes were located. Then on June the 14th, reports confirm that Pakistan now has arrested CIA informants that helped us locate Osama bin Laden, where he had been living under the eyes of the Pakistan military for years. As reported in the New York Times on June the 14th, ISI arrested 30 Pakistani informants who helped the United States capture bin Laden. One was a Pakistani Army major who officials said copied the license plates of cars visiting bin Laden's compound at Abbottabad. And then further in June, when CIA Director Leon Panetta went to Pakistan to inform them that there was a factory that were making bombs or IEDs that could be used against Americans, by the time the Pakistani troops showed up, the militants had disappeared. Not to be outdone, we told them again about a second place where IEDs were being made, more bomb-making facilities, only days later, and once again the terrorists picked up and disappeared. Sounds like they had inside information. And lastly, on June the 29th, Pakistan asked the United States to shut down a drone base that it had in Islamabad and ended U.S. operations at the Shamsi Air Base. Although the United States denies that occurred, Pakistan's defense minister said that that has ended those operations. And of course, drones carry out strikes against the Taliban and al-Qaeda militants in Pakistan's border with Afghanistan. And lastly, Transparency International has rated 178 countries in corruption, and Pakistan, our so-called ally, is rated the 143rd most corrupt, beating out, of course, Bangladesh and Nigeria, who have less corruption in their governments. So we're dealing with a corrupt government. We don't know where our money is going. It may end up in the hands of people who hate us. It's being wasted. The Taliban or the Pakistan military, the Pakistan government is trying to play at least 2 sides, our side, their side. They may be on a 3rd side. Who knows? But $1 billion that we send them for so-called reimbursement of the war on terror, we can stop that. They're an unfaithful ally. Only 17% of the Pakistan citizens say they even like the United States. That puts 83% against that do not like the United States. We don't need to pay the Pakistan people to hate us. They'll do it on their own. So we no longer need to fund them. We need to take $1 billion out of this account and put it into the deficit reduction spending account. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The bill includes approximately $2.4 billion to support the Pakistani military. Of this amount, $1.1 billion is for the Pakistan Counterinsurgency Fund, and approximately $1.3 billion is provided through coalition support funds. The Pakistani Counterinsurgency Fund provides for the training and equipping of Pakistani forces, specifically to aid U.S. counterterrorism objectives. Coalition support funds are used to reimburse the Pakistani military for operations which generally support U.S. counterterrorism objectives. In the wake of Osama bin Laden's killing by U.S. Special Forces, serious questions have arisen about Pakistan's reliability as a strategic partner. And I must say that I agree with much of what the gentleman from Texas has just said. The relationship with Pakistan has always been difficult, but maintaining the relationship is essential. This relationship helped the U.S. make progress against terrorism, and the Pakistanis have allocated a significant part of their forces within their own borders to this mission. A complete withdrawal of U.S. assistance would likely polarize Pakistan and exacerbate significant pro- and anti-American rifts with their military and their government generally. Aggravating this divide would be counterproductive to U.S. objectives in the region. And we must remember that they are also a nuclear power. In addition to the counterterrorism activity, the fact of Pakistan's nuclear weapons capability provides ample reason for the U.S. to continue to try and engage Pakistan, and I urge my colleagues to reject the amendment.
The gentleman yields back.
Yes, I yield.
Thank you. The question is on for what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The ranking member, Mr. Dix, has eloquently pointed out why we are opposing this amendment. But like Mr. Dix and like Mr. Poe, the author of the amendment, I couldn't agree more. If this language included the word Pakistan, I would probably have to have a different attitude on this amendment, because I share those concerns and I share them strongly. However, I understand the importance of our coalition and the coalition support fund that we have agreed to, and that we maintain that agreement. But I would say that someone at a higher level who deals internationally, diplomatically with other countries, including Pakistan, has dropped the ball somewhere. Because I agree with Mr. Poe, but I just don't think that we can be in a position that we can renege on our agreements with and our arrangements with our coalition partners, because they are very important to us and to the missions that we face. So, as reluctant as I might be sharing Mr. Poe's thoughts, I also will oppose this amendment.
The gentleman yields back.
I yield back. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman.
The amendment, gentleman from Texas.
Ask for a recorded vote, the ayes and yeas.
The gentleman's requested a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. The clerk will read.
Page 130, line 8, Operation and Maintenance, Army Reserve, $217,500,000. Operation and Maintenance, Navy Reserve, $74,148,000. Operation and Maintenance, Marine Corps Reserve, $36,084,000. Operation and Maintenance, Air Force Reserve, $142,050,000. Operation and Maintenance, Army National Guard, $387,544,000. Operation and Maintenance, Air National Guard, $34,050,000.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment. The clerk will continue reading.
Overseas Contingency Operations Transfer Funds, $5 billion.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that the amendment be considered as read.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Ms. Lee of California, page 131, line 25. Insert after the dollar amount the following, reduced by $5 million. Yeah. Page 161, okay, line 12.
Mr. Chairman, now may I ask for unanimous consent that the amendment be considered as read?
Without objection. The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I also, once again, thank Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Dix and my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee for their hard work on this bill. Let me also thank my colleagues who are joining Representative Jones and me on this bipartisan amendment, Representatives Woolsey, Olver, Honda, Grijalva, and Paul. I rise to offer the Lee-Jones Amendment to redirect the $5 billion of the Overseas Contingency Operations Transfer Fund into a deficit reduction account. This amendment does nothing to undermine the efforts that our servicemen and women have performed with incredible courage. Also, with extreme commitment, they performed in Afghanistan, Iraq, and around the world. They've done everything asked of them, and as a daughter of a military veteran, I take any matter that affects our troops very, very seriously. But supporting our troops does not mean giving a blank check to the Pentagon. I have consistently said that we cannot afford to give any more blank checks to the Defense Department. This amendment is about eliminating a giant $5 billion check with a blank memo to fight the global war on terror anywhere at any time without any accountability. The Department of Defense just has to notify Congress that these funds are being transferred. This $5 billion giveaway, which is what it is, it's like a slush fund. It's like a war slush fund. Another giveaway to the Pentagon. It's a $5 billion check to use as it pleases with little or no congressional oversight. There's no accountability in how these funds are spent. While we understand that the Pentagon needs flexibility to address terrorist threats to this nation and around the world, we need not create a separate slush fund, mind you, to do it. The flexibility has been given elsewhere in this bill, including $119 billion in flexibility in this appropriations bill, a tremendous amount, at a time when we are cutting aid to American families who need assistance with buying food or receiving health care, and also during a time when there are many calling for cuts in Medicare. We already have a process in place for the Pentagon to get additional funds as needed outside of this appropriations bill, and the Congress has consistently responded well to the needs of the military. But Congress does not need to create a $5 billion war slush fund. The Pentagon can incorporate its work to fight terrorism globally into its budget while taking steps to rein in waste, fraud, and abuse in an already bloated budget. 60 cents of every dollar of discretionary funds is already handed over to the Pentagon. There's no doubt that this war slush fund would give rise to opportunities for waste, fraud, and abuse at the Pentagon, such as the more than $300 billion in major weapon system cost overruns identified by GAO. It's time to address the culture of unlimited spending and no accountability at the Pentagon. Being strong on defense does not mean we have to give a free pass for irresponsible spending. During such austere times, does the Pentagon really need another slush fund? Why can't the Pentagon budget for its wars and budget for preventing terrorist attacks? It's time to hold the Defense Department accountable for its bloated budget and rein in waste, fraud, and abuse at the Pentagon by ending this war slush fund before it ever gets started. I think the American people would be shocked to know what's taking place in this budget, especially this $5 billion in war funding that's just put aside for the Pentagon to use as it pleases. And so I hope my colleagues will vote yes to end this slush fund, and let's start to rein in these blank checks for the Pentagon. We're asking people who are vulnerable, we're asking our senior citizens, we're asking low-income individuals, we're asking everyone in this country to pay for this deficit and this debt. And we know how we got there. But we need to start really beginning to look at deficit reduction in a real way, in a way that is balanced, as the President says. And I don't think allowing a $5 billion slush fund really moves us in the correct direction. It really is, I think, a real sad day to think that we would allow for the Pentagon to have a $5 billion slush fund when we cut funding for women and children and people who are hungry, when we won't extend unemployment for people who have exhausted their 99 weeks of unemployment compensation. I can remember asking the Speaker to allow us to vote for unemployment compensation that would provide for 14 additional weeks of unemployment, but we were told there's no money, and that was somewhere between 16, to 20 billion that should have been designated as an emergency. Now we're dealing with the $5 billion slush fund. So I ask for an aye vote to use this money for deficit reduction. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?